Welcome to Mystic Realms Recap. Links are in the description below. Please show some love of the author and me. On to the show. Although Lin Li did not know if he should laugh or cry at those words, they reminded him of his deed of stripping the Sire Bandits bare when they first came to the Black Clouds town. If he did not remember wrongly, the fellow before him was the one who was the first to pull his pants down and the fastest to flee. What's your name? I'm Roger Garcia. Hi Roger, nice to meet you, Lin Li said, and reached out his hand smilingly. Oh, yes. I just want to know your position in the Sire Bandits, he said to the robber whose pants he had once striped. Hi there, Roger stuttered. Lin Li's smile was terribly horrifying to him. Roger remembered it was with the same smile that he'd slain the hundreds of people earlier on. The thought of that magnificent icy flower made his knees tremble. After greeting Lin Li cautiously, Roger swallowed his saliva with much difficulty. I am just a small team leader of around 10 men. Do you have the confidence to let everyone follow your orders if I increase the strength of your men by a few thousands? Huh? Yes, I will let you become the next Vanscore, Lin Li affirmed at ease, with the same smile and very casual voice. It was as though he was not talking about one of the top 10 bandit groups in the breezy plains, but a work that required one to run errands and do odd jobs across a few hotels. You, Roger gasped as he opened his mouth wide. Even Adelo, who was a distance away, could hear the rough breathing of the unlucky bandit. Why you mean? You want me to become the chief of the Sire Bandits? Yeah, it's similar to that. But, we are not going to use the name of that organization. It sounds too lame. Moreover, your previous occupation that required you to rob seems not to allow you to reap good income when you offend other people due to it. I have to find other things for you to do. We are not in a rush now. The priority right now is to gain the respect from the thousand of men. Roger's mouth went dry as he heard the young mage's words. He realized that a rare opportunity had landed before him. That was right. It was indeed a rare opportunity. If that mage was not joking, it would mean that he had the intention of raising him as the new chief of the Sire Bandits. It had always been his dream to become like Chief Vanscore, who could march through the breezy plains unhindered with his thousands of men. Still, Roger never dared to think about it frequently. But now, an opportunity was actually right before him in reality. Roger believed that the mage had the ability to support him. The 300 people who planned the sneak attack that day were already the elites of the entire Sire Bandits, but they were defeated instantaneously without a chance of fighting against him. From how Lin Li killed the seemingly invincible Chief Vanscore, Roger knew that it would not take much effort for Lin Li to back him up. Roger gaped in a daze after hearing Lin Li's words. That wasn't surprising, for those words were even more impactful as compared to the battle earlier on. Roger needed some time to digest the situation. Since it was not an urgent matter, Lin Li did not insist that Roger give him an immediate reply. Lin Li stood there patiently, and waited for Roger to recover from his shock. Roger finally reacted after a minute. I have the confidence, Mr. Mage. I have confidence that they would listen to me. Very good, Lin Li said as he nodded. From now on, you are my man, follow me for the time being. When I settle the things here, I will tell you how to become the new Vanscore. Why yes, Mr. Mage. After sealing the fate of the Sire Bandits in a few words, when Lin Li wanted to call upon some of his men from the Tower of Dusk to introduce them to Roger, Adelo rushed towards him from behind. Mage. Mage Felix, could you please listen to my explanation for the matter just now? Adelo said anxiously. The sight of that hill covered with blood and dead bodies caused Adelo to feel really complicated. He was nervous, but at the same time relieved. Adelo was nervous due to the fact that it was Hutton who allowed the sneak attack. It was that obvious. Adelo had been participating in most of the secret projects of the Manhwa family for a few decades. He knew that there was a partnership between the Manhwa family and the Sire Bandits, and that Vanscore was on good terms with Hutton. If Hutton was not the mastermind behind the sneak attack led by Vanscore, he at least had to have given his seal of approval for it. Attila would not have dared to imagine what would happen if Mage Felix were to know about everything behind the scenes. But Attila felt a sense of relief at the same time. Thank goodness. Although Hutton did a foolish thing, he was clever enough to know he could silence people. Since neither the adventurers hired from Blackstone Town nor people from the Manhwa family had direct involvement in it, one could not simply tell that the sneak attack was planned by the Manhwa family. That made things easier. As both parties had yet to engage in any direct confrontation, Mage Felix's suspicions would not be able to stand without sufficient evidence. With that, the authority of the Manhwa family in the breezy plains and Mentor Cheyenne's powerful influence would have their effect. Furthermore, if he could flatter Felix a little, the issue of the sneak attack might even be resolved. Yes, Attila had clever ideas. However, he committed another unfortunate mistake. Who was Lin Li? To Jirian, he was a fella who would never take a loss willingly. How would such a troublemaker give in obediently? In fact, knowledge of the partnership between the Manhwa family and the Sire bandits and of the shady deal between Hutton and Vanscore was nothing. Lin Li just needed to know that he was currently 2 kilometers away from the Manhwa campsite, and that Hutton had sent a message through magic to tell Attila to get rid of himself. Hence, Lin Li did not give Attila any chance to explain himself. While they looked like they were chatting very casually and harmoniously as they walked down the hill, the topics discussed were all meaningless. Look, there has to be a misunderstanding, said Attila. He grew more and more anxious as they got closer to the Manhwa campsite. How could Attila not know the young mage's personality after several days spent journeying with him in the Scar of Death? Even though he'd been unaware of it in the beginning, how could he not get a clear picture after witnessing that huge massacre? Furthermore, if that young mage really meant it when he said he did not mind the sneak attack, why did he let that gigantic humorous WYRM stay in the air till now? As Lin Li's pace got increasingly faster, the sense of foreboding grew for Attila as well. *T, trouble is huge. Hutton walked into Sendros's tent almost at the same time. Hutton had a very grave expression. Just a few minutes ago, this first inheritor of the Manhwa family suddenly sensed that there was a shocking magical wave at the borders of the Scar of Death. With his wealth of knowledge about magic, Hutton knew it was the work of a level 19 archmage. The instant he felt the magical wave, Hutton realized that he had committed a mistake. The only people who could be at the border of the Scar of Death would only be either Vanscore and his Sire bandits or that advance party he wanted to silence. However, Hutton was certain that there was no level 19 archmage in Vanscore's team. Among the 30 mages Vanscore brought along, the stronger ones were at most level 12. He knew it would not be Attila either. How could he not know the abilities of his comrade? By elimination, the suspicious ones would be those who came from Black Cloud's town. Hutton was quite certain that the young president of the Tower of Dusk was actually that level 19 archmage. That was definitely bad news. To Vanscore and his Sire bandits, a level 19 archmage was actually formidable. The archmage would have the ability to deal with the sneak attack by himself. Even if the bandits were to gain the upper hand at the beginning, it would not be what he'd hoped for, trapping the young president in the Blackstone Mountains forever. That was what Hutton was really worried about. The background of the young president was too scary. It would mean immediate trouble after he came down from the Blackstone Mountains. Hence, Hutton had no choice but walk into Sendro's tent again. He hoped the legendary level necromancer could fulfill his promise and help him resolve that terrible mess. Master Sendros. I've heard of it already, Sendros said as he reached out his bony right arm for the staff that had been leaning against the table. Hutton felt it very clearly when that gust of magical waves was sent out. How could a legendary powerhouse like Sendros not realize it? To be honest, when he felt that, Sendros was actually rather curious. Since when was there such a powerful mage in the Blackstone Mountains? He knew that the wave was generated by somebody who was at least level 19 and a step away from the legendary realm. What could be more interesting to a legendary mage other than that? Even if Hutton was not going to find him, Sendros would take his magic staff out to look at the situation. That was neither to repay Cheyenne's favor nor to fulfill his promise to help get rid of anyone. It was purely his desire to meet a potential colleague who was about to break into the legendary realm. Sandros held his magic staff in his hands and muttered a spell. He then transformed into a puff of black smoke and vanished from the tent. Hopefully he can make it in time. Hutton's expression became calmer as he watched Sandros leave. Yet, he decided to follow behind Sandros after a moment of hesitation. Mage Felix, could you please give me a chance to explain? Seeing that the Malfa campsite was just a short distance away yet the menacing humorous WYRM was still in the air while the magical waves from the mage became more rigorous, Adalo was really anxious. Such bad luck. I guess I really need to listen to your nagging, Lin Li said as he stopped in his tracks. His eyes were fixed on the sky. Huh? Adalo was stunned. He looked in the direction of Lin Li's gaze and gasped. My lord. That was a bony figure with a long black robe. Its massive magical wave was suffocating. If he did not witness the lich shatter into pieces, Adalo might have thought that the lich had reappeared. However, although the one in the sky was not a lich, the magical waves it emitted was not any weaker. He could tell that it was mightier than a lich. Frack, that feeling made him breathless. Why is there another legendary character? How would I know? Lin Li replied as he rubbed his nose. While his expression stayed the same, he reached his hand to open the ring of endless storm discreetly. Although he had not taken a good look at who that threatening newcomer was, he was certain that it was a powerful person in the legendary realm. Lin Li could guess the motives of that man. To soar above him so cockily, that legendary powerhouse should not be a mere passerby. A level 19 archmage could easily wipe out the entire Sire bandits and kill Vanscore, but he might face some difficulty if his opponent were someone in the legendary realm. Perhaps Holy Light and Gloomy Dark could be of help to him. Oh, if he were to summon the humorous WYRM, he would have good odds. At this point, even Lin Li failed to discover the shift in his mindset. If it was a few days ago, the first thing Lin Li would think of when he saw somebody in the legendary realm would be to escape. However, defeating that level 20 lich in the Scar of Death gave Lin Li tremendous confidence. It not only brought him up by a level, but also enabled him to battle as a legendary figure. Although it was with the help of the all-knowing potion, the experience he acquired was the most valuable gift. Hence, when Lin Li faced another man in the legendary realm, the first thought that appeared in his mind was not to escape, but to get rid of him. As the dark figure loomed closer, the magical waves became even more vigorous and suffocating. The massive death aura which it emitted was not as pungent as the lich's. Instead, it was like a boulder that caused people to be extremely breathless. At the same time, Lin Li also pushed his mental strength to the limits. The two equally able mages confronted each other in a very unusual way. Although it was not a physical exchange, their confrontation was one that was more threatening. Under the demonstration of the two great forces, the magical elements in the environment fell apart, and the sky started to distort. However, despite the risky interaction between the two forces, Lin Li's posture was not affected at all. The huge gust of mana was like tide waters, pouring out of his body. Seconds trickled by. Beads of cold sweat trickled down Lin Li's forehead as well. His method of calling out his mana was a self-destructive act. Even though Lin Li's mental strength was stronger than normal people's, he would not be able to sustain it for long. Yet, he knew he had to press on. If he were to show any sign of faltering, Lin Li would be greatly disadvantaged. How could an archmage with a drained mana be able to fight a real legendary mage? Hence, Lin Li could only persevere, no matter how hard it was. 1 minute, 2 minutes, 3 minutes. Although only 10 minutes passed by, it seemed like an eternity to Lin Li. Every second was tortuous to him. At that point, Lin Li's mental strength was like a taut bowstring that had been stretched to its limits. Simultaneously, it was the same for the figure in the sky. The suffocating conflict between them weakened by a great extent and vanished gradually. Phew, Lin Li sighed, and fell weakly to his feet when the last bit of pressure went away. It was a terrifying encounter that placed a great deal of stress on his physical body and mental capacity. If not for his extraordinary mental ability, Lin Li would have gone entirely berserk. It was fortunate for him to be able to withstand that challenge. Lin Li drew several big breaths, and fished out an energy potion from his pocket. Lin Li downed a whole bottle of the awakening potion, and regained some energy for his weakened body. However, he did not have any way to replenish his mental strength, as it was impossible for people under the level of a divine smith to do so. His awakening potion could only trigger existing mental strength to hasten the rate of mana recovery. It was of no use to him now when he lacked mental strength. Lin Li's current weakness was no secret to the man from the legendary realm. As the black figure descended from the sky, it symbolized the official beginning of the battle between them. Yet, Lin Li was not afraid at all. Right from the beginning, he had no intention of using his energy to defeat that opponent. The humorous WYRM had been flapping its long and bony wings in the air. Lin Li knew he could let it spit out terrifying ice flame at any moment. Gloomy dark and the holy light could be triggered at any time from the ring of endless storm, which had been opened long ago. Seeing that an earth-shattering battle was just a step away from them, everyone held their breath in anticipation and fear. No one realized that there was a menacing presence hidden in the thicket not far away. It was Hutton, who had followed Sendros all the way here. In reality, Hutton had reached that place very early, and witnessed the start of the indirect confrontation. Yet, he was hiding in the thicket so as not to alarm Sendros. Hutton had to admit that the exchange was not one that he had expected. As a level 18 archmage, he was one of the more powerful mages in the whole breezy plains. Even Adalo had to bow to Hutton's superiority despite entering the industry earlier than him. Hence, Hutton generally gathered more understanding from that exchange as compared to the others. Sendros's ability is actually on par with that dude's. Hutton had to admit that the young president of the Guild of Magic was the most powerful talent he had ever met. How could a young man aged around 20 be able to emit such a threatening aura? Not to forget, his opponent was the most powerful high priest from the Darkness Shrine, Necromancer Sendros in the legendary realm. Hutton could not believe that the 20-years-old young president could be on par with a mighty man like Sendros. Hutton had mixed feelings about that absurdity. He was not only impressed and jealous, but was also filled with awe and fear. Having become a level 18 archmage before the age of 30, and been recognized as the first mage with a huge potential by the strictest mentor Cheyenne, Hutton had always thought himself to be the most talented magic genius in this world. He believed Cheyenne's words that it was only a matter of time for him to reach the legendary realm. His belief stayed the same even when he sensed the vigorous magical waves earlier on, which made him wonder if that young president of the Guild of Magic was really a level 19 archmage. Hutton had felt that his being at the peak of level 18 made him not a bit weaker than that president. Estimating himself to be able to reach level 19 in half a year's time, Hutton was certain that he could get closer to the legendary realm if he were to devote his time spent on the management of the Maltha's business to research on magic. But now, Hutton finally realized the existence of that wide gap between people of the same level. At least, he did not have the guts to challenge Sendros. He even had to muster all his courage and energy to engage in a casual conversation whenever he stood before Sendros. The ability of a legendary mage was horrifying, especially for Sendros, who did not care to suppress his energy. Any slight sense of energy he emitted would suffice to create nightmares for a powerful man like Vanscore for a few days. Therefore, how did that 20-years-old president do it to even be on par with Sendros? Hutton felt a sudden disappointment when he witnessed that exchange between Lin Li and Sendros. To a genius, the hardest thing to accept was the existence of a more talented individual. It was the same for Hutton now. He'd never felt so ashamed and insulted, as he understood very well that he would never catch up to Lin Li's standard. Hutton knew he would fall further behind Lin Li as time passed by. To him, it was a fact he could not accept. Hutton was elated when he saw Sendros descending from the sky. He knew that it would be the death of the mage the moment Sendros touched the ground. No matter how talented Lin Li was, he would never be able to defeat Sendros before reaching the legendary realm. If the motive behind Hutton's decision to silence Lin Li at the start was to keep the secret of the treasure map, his reason now would be to get rid of this rival. As long as this talent existed for one more day, it meant another day of insult and disappointment for Hutton. Hutton's eyes lit up when Sandro's feet came into contact with the ground. At that instant, Hutton imagined countless undead creatures crawling out from the soil and tearing that young talent into pieces. Unfortunately, it did not happen as Hutton had expected. He saw a friendly Sandros walking towards that young mage. "I'm very glad to meet you here, Mage Felix. As compared to the last time I met you in Duland, your abilities have improved a lot," said Sandros as he patted the young president. Hutton could not believe his ears. That was not the hardest thing for Hutton to accept. Hutton's jaw dropped when he saw Sandros' genuine smile. It was as though Sandros had met an old friend. "Master Sandros, you gave me a very special greeting," Lin Li laughed as he glared at Sandros. Internally, he was condemning both the lich he met in the cave as well as the man before him. Why isn't necromagic practiced by any neurotypical being? "I was only curious to find out how much you have improved after leaving Alana," said the necromancer as he laughed. That was perhaps the only time for that corpse-like being to have a human-like smile on his face. His genuine smile was a symbol of trust Sandros only showed certain people. Strictly speaking, the young and old were very far apart in terms of their ability and position. In terms of ability, while Sandros had broken to the legendary realm decades ago, Lin Li had only reached the doorstep of the realm. In terms of position, while Sandros was the most powerful high priest in the Darkness Shrine, and had created true legends, Lin Li had just become the president of the Breezy Plains Guild of Magic, which even the Castellan of Dulan City might not be aware of. However, there was something Sandros would never be able to match Lin Li in, the attainments in pharmaceutical studies. It was this achievement that made Sandros consider Lin Li to be on the same level as him. In reality, Sandros was not alone. People like Balba, and Los, and Burnside would never dare to display their pride as a legendary powerhouse in front of Lin Li, or treat the young man like an inferior. They would converse with Lin Li like normal friends, and consult him humbly if they were to face any issues. Of course, that was only known to only a few master pharmacists. People like Hutton and Adelo would naturally not be able to access such secrets. Hutton nearly spat blood when he watched Sandros smiling cautiously at Lin Li. He could not believe his eyes at all. Did that President Felix gobble a bear's heart or a leopard's gut? How could he have the courage to display such a stance before Sandros? Did he not acknowledge Sandros's influence and power? Sandros was a man whom even his mentor Cheyenne would not dare to offend. What's wrong with this President Felix? The wait was what agitated Hutton the most. When was Sandros going to show any sign of anger towards Felix? How could this renowned legend be so meek in front of him? At that moment, Hutton thought he saw the sun rising from the west. "Call Adelo over," said Hutton the moment he stepped into his tent. Hutton was not as useless as Harvey. Once he found out that Lin Li might have a strong relation with Sandros, the first heir of the Manhwa family stopped to brainstorm about the implications thereof immediately. It was very obvious that matters had gone out of his control. He suspected the support behind President Felix to be more than what he could imagine. Otherwise, the conversation between Felix and Sandros would not be so friendly. Apart from the president from Alana Guild of Magic, which president from the other 23 guilds would have the guts to speak so casually to Sandros? Furthermore, it seemed that President Felix had terrifying powers as well. Hutton witnessed the scuffle between the youth and the elder firsthand. Although he was hiding a few hundred meters away from them, Hutton could sense the threatening force emitted by Sandros very clearly. The President Felix had to be very powerful to be able to match Sandros' energy. Where on earth did that Felix come from? When he thought of that question, Hutton was stunned. He suddenly realized that he knew nothing about President Felix. Although the Manhwa family had a strong network of connections, it seemed insignificant before President Felix. As of now, Hutton only knew that President Felix was from Jerosa's Guild of Magic. He heard that this man performed very well in Alana, defeating Gryffindor and also Matthias from Nightfall City. His achievements were acknowledged by the Supreme Council, and got him his position today, the president of the Breezy Plains Guild of Magic. What about other information? As of now, Hutton admitted that he had no idea who Felic's mentor was. He wouldn't be the president of the Gerosis Guild of Magic, Girion, would he? That plump old fella was just a level 15 archmage, who suffered a loss fighting a team of bandits not long ago, and should be in a very bad state now. How could that man produce such an outstanding disciple? Furthermore, how did the young president even know Sendros? It was a well-known fact in Amril that Sendros did not have many friends due to him being an eccentric and unsociable man who studied necromagic. That certainly did not explain the close-knitted relationship between the old and young duo. Sendros' cautious smile before Felic's rage was a scene that should only appear in a dream. Hutton could not fathom Felic's identity at all. To him, it was as though the young man was birthed from a rock and got to become a president without any reason. If he had not witnessed that situation today, Hutton would never have believed that the young mage aged 20 owned such a formidable strength. He could not help but feel threatened by that terrifying strength. On the way back, Hutton just could not step out of his state of disbelief. He called Adelo over to learn about what Felic did throughout the journey in the Scar of Death. Adelo entered Hutton's tent after a minute. "Brother Adelo, you must be tired." "It's nothing." Although Adelo entered the trade many years before Hutton, he never dared to treat Hutton as an inferior. While Hutton might be addressing Cheyenne as his mentor, that man was actually his biological grandfather. On the other hand, Adelo was just another high-ranking servant of Hutton, despite working for the Manhwa family for over 10 years. But Adelo was especially disgruntled with Hutton. How could he have instructed Vanscore to launch a sneak attack without discussing it with the team, and at such a critical timing at that? Now that things had been done, the relationship Adelo had previously built with Felic was lost as well. Although it did not seem like Mage Felic had any intention of starting a commotion yet, Adelo did not dare to be reckless when he interacted with him. The examples of the Lich and Vanscore made evident that it all ultimately depended on Felic. If Felic decided to confront them overtly, he would not give them any chance to regret. The 20-year-old mage was indeed a frightening man. "Oh, yes, senior brother. How's the trip to the Scar of Death? I hope things went well?" "Yeah, it was good," Adelo replied as he nodded his head. "But, why did you let Vanscore do it?" Adelo asked after a moment of hesitation. "Why did I let Vanscore do it? Senior brother, did you forget what Mentor Cheyenne told us before we went to the Blackstone Mountains? This time, our target is the Immortal King's treasure map. If the information were to be leaked to other people, it might bring about the fall of the Manhwa family," Hutton replied Adelo in a condemning tone. "Do you not understand I'm trying to cover up for your mistake? You didn't know the situation at the Scar of Death at all. What happened at Scar of Death?" Hutton's rage simmered as he asked Adelo, curiously. Although he had been using magic to communicate with Adelo all the while, he did not know more about the Scar of Death trip than the others. Otherwise, he would not have instructed Vanscore to launch such a foolish sneak attack. "You ask me what happened? Have you met thousands of vampires, over 30 Death Knight riding on shapeshifters, a humorous WYRM that's a dozen meter long, or a lich with unlimited powers? I had seen all that in the Scar of Death." Adelo listed the incredible occurrences like a bullet train. "And because of that, it ascertained my stand that instructing Vanscore to launch that attack was the worst mistake you have ever committed in these few years." "Oh? Since you have never experienced Scar of Death yourself, you would never be able to imagine how terrifying and formidable Mage Felic was. I understand what you were thinking. You must have thought that a level 19 Archmage would not be able to fight back. You must have thought that you could employ Mentor Cheyenne to get rid of this man who had greater powers than you. Isn't that so? If Mentor Cheyenne were to interfere, I'm not very certain that it would succeed. But, that Master Sendros you employed to deal with Felic is for sure not going to be able to help us." "That can't be." Hutton sprang up front his seat. He was both angry and amused by his senior brother's senseless words. That was right. Hutton could admit that Felic's ability was absurd and almost impossible to believe. Yet, how could he even reach Sendros's proficiency? Hutton was an archmage at his peak. How could he be unaware of the great difference between level 19 and level 20? Not to exaggerate, even if Felix was really a level 19 archmage, he wouldn't be able to defeat the legendary powerhouse. This was general knowledge to every mage. How would Adalo sprout such an absurd nonsense? Furthermore, Hutton had personally witnessed the exchange between the two people. Although Felix managed to achieve a draw with Sendros, it was a fact that he had his mental strength drained in the process. If Sendros cast another spell on Felix upon descending from the sky instead of patting his shoulder friendly, that mage should have turned into a corpse by now. The difference between level 19 and level 20 was not one that could be balanced out by strong mental strength. This fact should be common sense to Adalo. How could he spout such a childish nonsense? Could it be that he damaged his brain due to the dangerous journey? Nothing is impossible, Adalo emphasized. He knew that it was difficult to convince Hutton. In hindsight, the happenings in the Scar of Death were so unrealistic that it was hard for himself to believe everything. Hence, Adalo did not insist that Hutton be on the same page as him. At the beginning, my thinking was similar to yours. I thought that a mage aged 20 would not be able to become a hindrance to us, for I could easily pin him down with my abilities. But my mindset changed shortly after we encountered a large group of vampires. A group of vampires? Didn't Teacher Cheyenne tell us that most of the undead creatures in Scar of Death had already been eliminated? Mentor Cheyenne was wrong, Adalo said as he shook his head. Throughout these 20 years, the undead creatures in Scar of Death actually multiplied. It was as if there was a mysterious force that enhanced the abilities of those undead creatures. The skeletal warriors, there were around level 8, and the horrifying vampires we met were level 13. Hutton frowned. If those words came from other people, Hutton would ignore it casually, or take a revenge on them for harming Mentor Cheyenne's credibility. However, when the man before him was Adalo, he could not help but consider those words seriously. Adalo started following Mentor Cheyenne since he was a teen. Now that 20 years had passed, his loyalty to Cheyenne had surpassed that of anyone else. He would adhere to anything his mentor say, even if it would cost him his life. Now that he was saying that Mentor Cheyenne was wrong, it meant that he was really wrong. However, the thought of level 8 skeletal warriors and level 13 vampires was one that seemed impossible. It was not uncommon for undead creatures to level up. As long as they could obtain an unlimited supply of soul fire, they would be able to surpass their present capacity and reach the next. For instance, one of the 3 skeletal lords of the Shadowglen rose to where he was from engulfing sufficient soul fire. Yet, how many skeletal lords could there be in Amril? Soul fire could strengthen the abilities of ordinary skeletal warriors. For one to rise to a skeletal lord, it had to engulf many other undead creatures that were at the same level in the process. These skeletal lords were lucky enough to have survived to this stage, and thus were 1 in a million. Hence, how could Adalo be making sense when he said that the entire place was filled with undead creatures that had reached the cap of their abilities? Furthermore, apart from vampires, there were many death knights, among which the stronger ones had reached level 18. I thought we were dead. Then, it was Mage Felix who stepped out. He used a level 21 spell and eliminated all the vampires. 21? Hutton exclaimed in shock. That's right, level 21, the Eternal Light spell. I don't believe it. Hutton felt as though he was turning crazy. It was already absurd enough for a 20-years-old mage to reach level 19. Hence, it had to be impossible for him to cast a level 21 spell. Adalo should have suffered a trauma in the Scar of Death to spout such a nonsense. That should be it. I did not believe it at first, but that is the reality. He used the level 21 Eternal Light spell to eliminate hundreds of vampires instantaneously, and made a group of Death Knights submit to him. Oh, yes, I forgot to tell you that Mage Felix brought the group of Death Knights out of the Scar of Death as well. Amongst them, the weaker ones are at level 15, and the stronger ones are at level 18. That's nasty, Hutton commented as he drew a deep breath. That was what made Vanscore's attack so foolish. Even if Mage Felix were not to interfere, the group of Death Knights would kill them within 10 minutes. what happened afterwards? We went into that cave, and met a lich at the spot Mentor Cheyenne talked about. That lich summoned a humorous WYRM there. Adelo started to talk about how they discovered the altar, how the lich fell from the sky, and how surprising the battle was. Along the way, Adelo also answered Hutton's questions. The recount of his journey in the Scar of Death ended only in the late evening. To be honest, I'm really shocked. Although we have been together in the Scar of Death for so many days, I still could not judge how powerful he is. He has too many secrets. Every time I thought I knew his background, he would give me a bigger surprise, such as casting a level 21 spell and employing legendary realm powers. This makes me start to wonder if there is anything in the world he is not capable of. That is because he hasn't met someone stronger than him. I know what you want to tell me, Adelo said as he smiled helplessly. He had been with Hutton for more than a decade. How could he not know what was on Hutton's mind? Do you think that Mage Felix would have died if Sendros had had the same perspective as you? Could that not be so? That's because you have only met Sendros, and not the humorous WYRM. I saw it with my very own eyes that when I was standing behind Mage Felix. When Sendros descended from the sky, one of Mage Felix's hands was already on that oil lamp, ready to summon the humorous WYRM. Yet, the crucial part lies in his other hand. I don't know where he hid it, but every time he did so, he would create impossible occurrences like the level 21 Eternal Light spell and the sudden appearance of legendary realm powers. I dare bet my life that if Sendros had attacked Felix back then, he would have been the one to die instead of the mage. Hutton remained silent. He stared at Adelo in a daze as though he was trying to figure out Felix's real identity in his eyes. After 10 minutes of silence, Hutton spoke. Senior brother, it is not that I do not want to believe you, but what you said sounds really unbelievable. Why don't you return to Aminia first to speak to Mentor Cheyenne? Oh, yes. Senior brother, did you suffer an attack from any mental spell when you were in the Scar of Death? Hutton asked in a serious tone. Forget it, I knew you wouldn't believe me, Adelo said as he shook his head in disappointment. How could he not know what Hutton was implying? By suggesting that he return to Aminia City, it meant that Hutton hoped Adelo would stop interfering with the activities in the Blackstone Mountains. Adelo did not have a strong objection to it. Furthermore, he planned to hand the Immortal King's treasure map over to Mentor Cheyenne. I will return to Aminia tomorrow, Adelo replied. Hutton, please stop going against Mage Felix. Now that Vanscore is dead, and Sendros's action turned out to be a misunderstanding, I feel that he shouldn't be greatly offended. If you were to challenge him, I'm sure he wouldn't give you any chance to regret. Yeah, I will be careful, promised Hutton. Even without Adelo's reminder, Hutton had no plans to challenge Felix for the time being. Now that he knew that Sendros had a close-knitted relationship with that fella, it would be the end for him if he were to enrage that necromancer in the legendary realm. There would be a lot of chances for him to deal with that Felix in the future. That fella wanted to kill you, Sendros spoke in a very casual tone. It was as if the matter was not one which concerned life and death, but a possibility that somebody had the intention to borrow some money. I knew it long ago, Lin Li replied as he pursed his lips unaffectedly. One would not expect from their calm expressions that they were discussing something as serious as murder. No one would have expected that the fella mentioned in their conversation was the first heir of the Manhwa family, the mage with the greatest potential in the breezy plains, Hutton. It could not be helped, though. Sendros' rationale was different from that of normal people, to begin with. To him, this type of things did not deserve to be invested greatly. If Hutton had the intention of challenging Felix, he could just kill him with ease. If the Manhwa family were to show any sign of disapproval, he could also eliminate them in the process. As for the small favor he owed Cheyenne, he could repay it easily through other means. It certainly was not as important as Felix's safety. Sendros knew that Felix was the strongest pharmacist of Anril in history, and could very well break into the Guru realm within 10 years. He was a man born to rewrite the history of pharmacy. The Manhwa family would be nothing in comparison to Felix. Even if Sendros did not tell him, Lin Li also knew Hutton wanted to kill him. Things were obvious. Vanscore led a group of 300 and went under cover at the border of the Scar of Death. Even if the guards of the Manhwa family were blind and deaf, they would have known that something was wrong. Why didn't they take any action? All in all, it was just that Sir Hutton who did not want to take any responsibility for killing him. His plan of making use of somebody to do the deed was great, but that person being Vanscore was just a bad idea. Come to think of it, Sir Hutton was a really calm man. Despite the fact that the advance party returned to the camp quite some time ago already, Hutton never followed up with the team at all. It was as though Hutton had not dispatched any advance party in the first place. When Adelo came over in the afternoon to speak for the Manhwa family, he tried to convince Lin Li that Vanscore had planned the attack all by himself. Of course, Adelo also promised that the Manhwa family would investigate into the situation as soon as possible. Lin Li literally turned a deaf ear while Adelo was telling him all those things. He entertained him smilingly and sent him away smilingly. He did not care to wait for any evidence of the mastermind. Did one even need an evidence for something as serious as a murder or an arson? Of course, Lin Li did not seek trouble with Hutton after sending Adelo off. Lin Li stayed in Sendro's tent for the entire afternoon. They chatted about magic, pharmacy, and many other things, everything but the sneak attack that had happened that afternoon. To both the old and the young man, that was a trouble that could be solved easily. It would be a waste of time to talk about that. Knowing the mastermind would suffice. It was only natural for the two pharmacy talents to discuss pharmacy when they were together. Sendros was not an amateur like Jirian. He'd spent a few decades studying pharmacy, and had become a master in his study. Lin Li secretly admired him for his insightful comments and perspectives. Furthermore, as someone in the legendary realm, Sendros could travel everywhere in Anril to broaden his horizons. He was like a living encyclopedia. The thrilling anecdotes and eccentric pharmaceutical formulas shared by him expanded Lin Li's worldview as well. Of course, Sendros gained much more knowledge as compared to Lin Li. Despite having less experience than Sendros, as a real guru of pharmacy who mastered all pharmaceutical concepts and formulae, his practice had reached the point of near perfection. The longer Sendros talked to Lin Li, the more shocked he grew. Although he knew that the young man was a genius in pharmacy, it was only after the deep conversation that Sendros realized he had underestimated Lin Li. Not only did complex pharmaceutical information become like a simple math equation to Lin Li, the young man was also able to analyze the principle behind every underrated and uncommon formula and give substantial evidence to back it up. In the beginning, Sendros only had intended to discuss knowledge with Lin Li. However, as they conversed, guilt grew within the esteemed pharmaceutical master. By the time the sun set, the casual chat between the old and young man turned into Sendros' consultation with Lin Li. With that, something scary happened in that tent. Sendros, who was both a legendary mage and a master in pharmacy, became like a disciple who'd just entered the world of pharmacy. He sat upright and wrote down notes while Lin Li told him about many case studies and used layman's terms to describe the most complex pharmaceutical knowledge. Unfortunately, Lin Li's lack of patience made him a brute mentor. When Sendros expressed his doubts in an attempt to clarify things, Lin Li would flare up at that poor man with coarse words and vulgarities. Sendros was so very ashamed that he did not dare to lift his head despite having lived life for close to 100 years. The terrible thing was, Sendros seemed to have transformed into a masochist. The harsher Lin Li treated him, the more excited he grew. That pallid and corpse-like face actually turned pink due to his excitement. The whole afternoon was just Sendros bombing Lin Li with a lot of questions and frantically taking notes. His gaze resting on Lin Li was feverish beyond description. It was good that Sendros' tent was not a place anyone would have dared to enter. Otherwise, the scene inside would have scared them insane. Only Sendros knew how greatly he had benefited that afternoon. Not to exaggerate, the knowledge he'd gained from all the lashings from Lin Li was equivalent to 10-year-long research if he completely retreated from civilization. Sendros could not help but ask, "Felix, have you reached the Guru realm already?" I'm not sure," Lin Li patronized Sendros' query. It has to be the Guru realm. Sendros did not know Lin Li was so wicked, lying to him when he had been scolding him for the entire afternoon. Of course, Sendros could not help believing him either. It was an extremely honorable achievement to be able to break into the Guru realm. Their names would be recorded in history and mentioned even after 1,000 years. To Sendros, no pharmacist in the world would reject such noble recognition. Hence, Sendros believed Lin Li when the latter said he was unsure about his progress. Sendros even tried to help that wicked man plan his career growth. Why don't you visit the Darkness Shrine when you are free? I have a few rare Guru-level pharmacy formulae there. If you have the ability to create those potions, you are going to rock the entire Anral world. A pharmaceutics guru is all it takes to rock the entire Anral world? Don't you know that a few centuries passed since a pharmaceutics guru appeared in Anral world? Sendros glanced at Lin Li suspiciously. If you could really reach that realm, you would be the first pharmaceutics guru in several centuries. Wouldn't that alarm the whole Anral? That's great. If I have the time, I'll head to Darkness Shrine, Lin Li agreed readily. This was indeed his first time knowing about the prestige of a pharmaceutics guru. As he had not met any pharmaceutics guru previously, Lin Li used to think that it was because the pharmacist guild had a low standard. With Anral being a very huge piece of land, who would know where a guru-level pharmacist hid? Now that Sendros told him that, Lin Li finally knew that it was because a guru had not appeared for a few centuries. It was no wonder that those old men at the pharmacist guild treated him like a Buddha, despite their high status. It seemed that the pharmacy standard in Anral was lower than he had imagined. Although he was not sure whether there were any divine smiths in the Dark Age, he knew the only way for him to progress to that level was to use the rare historic treatises from the Dark Age. As pharmaceutical concepts were created by the High Elves, Lin Li was sure that there were plenty of pharmaceutics gurus in the Dark Age. Out of the 10 gurus mentioned the historical records, one was Osric. But, Sendros paused and smiled. If you really break into the Guru realm, you can gain some benefits from the Brilliant Shrine. Brilliant Shrine? Lin Li was confused why Sendros would mention the Brilliant Shrine. Then, he remembered the matter Inglos told him about during his presidential ceremony. You mean the viper's poison the Pope suffers from? That's right. It seems that Inglos has told you about it long ago. He only mentioned it briefly during the presidential ceremony. I'm not very sure what it is about. The reality is actually very simple. Very long ago, this Pope accidentally got infected with the viper's poison. He would have died if not for the constant support from the force of divine. The Brilliant Shrine has been searching for a pharmaceutics guru who has the ability to cure the viper's poison. They even promised a huge reward. What reward? A request. A request that does not go against the teachings of the Holy Light. Lin Li was speechless. He felt that the Brilliant Shrine had put too much importance on the matter. He could easily think of over 10 requests that would not go against the teachings of the shrine. He would be able to gain great benefits from any one of them. Felix, please remember what I am going to tell you now. While saying that, Sendros' expression became very grave and a little bit devout. If you were to rid Pope of the viper's poison one day, please request the Pope to hand the Helios scepter to you. Why? Asked Lin Li. He did not expect that. That's because there is a secret within the Helios scepter. It is a secret only known to the high priests. Don't you wonder why the high priest of the Darkness Shrine would know the secret of the Brilliant Shrine? Yeah, indeed. The reason is very simple. That's because there was no Darkness Shrine or Brilliant Shrine 1,300 years ago. There was only the Eternal Shrine. Eternal Shrine? Lin Li frowned upon hearing the familiar name. I must have heard about this before. Oh, yes. Gerosis. When he was in the dungeon of the Merlin family, the middle-aged man who had given him a lot of help once held his hand and requested that he bring Ina to the Eternal Shrine to meet her mother. That's right. It is that Eternal Shrine. Apart from that, the middle-aged man gave him half of a crossbow bolt, and said that it was the only clue to find the Eternal Shrine. However, Lin Li had not gathered much information, despite having asked many people about the bolt. That's another secret. A secret that no one hoped to believe. Almost everyone in the whole Amril thought that the Brilliance Shrine and the Darkness Shrine had been created only after the fall of the High Elves dynasty. Wasn't that so? Of course not, Sendros shook his head. But, there wouldn't be more than 10 who know about this secret in this world. Even for me, I only know it after becoming the High Priest. Brilliance Shrine and Darkness Shrine were initially part of the Eternal Shrine. The only difference now is that one subscribes to the Holy Light, while the other the Gloomy Darkness. What the F***ck? Lin Li could not help but turn vulgar after hearing the 1,000-year secret. It might sound surprising, but if you think about it, don't you realize both the Brilliance Shrine and the Darkness Shrine already had their teachings from the first day they were established? That's against the law of nature. It is impossible for any teaching to be established in a single day, not to mention radical teachings that the Brilliance Shrine and the Darkness Shrine subscribe to. Are you trying to tell me that the teachings of the Brilliance Shrine and the Darkness Shrine were from the Eternal Shrine? Lin Li said as he swallowed his saliva. He restrained himself from saying the word copied. Sendros' words were too shocking. Lin Li could not help but look at Sendros in a different light. Damn, why didn't I notice his daring personality in the past? He actually dares to share his skepticism about the two great shrines like that. It was lucky that he was a mage. If the devotees of the shrine were to hear such a critical comment, they would flip the table. Had Sendros been so blunt with his words during the prehistoric age, he would have been burnt by fire. Copied. Just when Lin Li was still flabbergasted, Sendros said the word without batting an eyelid. That was the word Lin Li did not dare to say. You have to be crazy, Lin Li replied as he rolled his eyes. That was not originally said by me. After saying that notorious word, copied, Sendros did not seem to have any sense of guilt. The writings of the Darkness Shrine state very clearly that brilliance and darkness originated from the Eternal, hence they belong to the Eternal. That is not a shameful secret. Besides me, all of the high priests of the Darkness Shrine knew about it. I presume that the archbishops of Brilliance Shrine should know it too. Hey, what's the use of telling me such a huge secret? Aren't you afraid that I'll spill the beans when I dream? Sendros smiled. Then he looked at Lin Li for a period of time. That's because I'm certain that you are the reincarnation of darkness as prophesized. What type of darn prophecy is that? That is a prophecy only known to the high priests. It had been recorded in the writings of the Darkness Shrine. I can let you have a look when you are free to visit. The record says that one day the reincarnation of darkness will bring the most powerful force of darkness to Amril. What has it got to do with me? Of course it does have something, Sendros replied with a calm smile. Do you still remember the exchange between us this afternoon? You exerted a massive dark force. Lin Li mumbled. He knew where the problem had gone wrong. It was true that he used the force of gloomy dark that afternoon, but it was to hide the humorous WYRM from Sendros. Or else, how would he even be able to hide that gigantic WYRM from a legendary realm powerhouse? Did his unfulfilled plan turn him into a reincarnation of darkness instead? But, thinking about it, it made sense too. The force of gloomy dark was extremely pure. It indeed could be labeled as the deepest of darkness in the world. However, Lin Li did not want to be the reincarnation of darkness at all. Why did he have to become the reincarnation of darkness? As a master pharmacist who was on good terms with both of the shrines, he could reveal his identity as the pharmaceutics guru whenever he felt like it. He could rid the Pope of his viper's poison and turn himself into the great benefactor of the Brilliance Shrine whenever he wanted as well. At that time, they would not dare to give him a moon if he were to request a star. How could the job of the reincarnation of darkness be so easy? The Brilliance Shrine was not as forgiving as they seemed. They might have the ability to maintain a good relationship between the archbishops and the bishops, but wouldn't the devotees go mad and provoke another grand battle? He would not know what to do at that time. God damn it, why am I so unlucky? You will think differently after hearing me out, Sendros said calmly. Having known Lin Li for such a long time, how would Sendros not know his personality? To put it nicely, the best word to describe Lin Li was pragmatic. benefit was the only thing that could move him. You have to know that in the scriptures of the Darkness Shrine, the identity of the reincarnation of darkness is the most honorable and respected. Even the 3 high priests would have to adhere to your wishes. Oh? Do you mean I can make the people from the Darkness Shrine resolve any trouble for me? Lin Li said as his eyes lit up. That was a reaction Sendros had expected. Of course. Very good. From today onwards, I am the reincarnation of darkness. Lin Li said excitedly with all righteousness he could muster. His mood had changed faster than one could flip the pages of a book. Then, he shamelessly added, oh, yes. If you were to meet in Los, please help me ask if the brilliant shrine needs any reincarnation too. I am willing to join their side as well. Sendros was beyond speechless. Although he was a man with a good temperament, he nearly burst due to a heart attack upon hearing Lin Li's words. Damn, how can a man be so shameless? After that spell of narcissism, something struck Lin Li. Oh, yes. Did you say that I could request help from the Darkness Shrine if I were to have any problem? I just remembered that I needed some help. Sendros, can you help me think of a way to solve it? What trouble? I want to get rid of a crimson python as soon as possible. Crimson python? Sendros froze. Isn't a crimson python a level 18 magical beast? Why do you need my help when you have the ability to get rid of it very easily yourself? That is a level 20 crimson python. Oh, so it has been mutated. Sendros understood Lin Li's concerns immediately. What do you think? Are you going to help me? When do you plan to set off? As soon as possible. This crimson python is very important. I don't want the Manhwa family to get there before I do. It is too late today. The sky is really dark now. If we were to barge into the nest of the crimson python, I'm afraid it might be dangerous. Why don't we do it tomorrow afternoon? After saying that, Sendros gazed curiously at Lin Li. Why is the crimson python important to you? It is not like you need the legendary magical crystal. Lin Li stared at Sendros. It was only once he saw the guilt in the eyes of the legendary mage that he asked, have you forgotten what you just learned? How many times did I tell you that in the nests of legendary beasts, especially those that turned into legendary creatures due to mutation, there is a high chance for rare herbs to grow? For example, 2 mutated crimson pythons would spur the growth of the dragon's tongue. If we have the dragon's tongue, black lotus, and the fruit of Moana tree, we would be able to create a legendary level rune potion. I presume you know the effects of the rune potion. Alright. In the whole Anral world, Sendros and Lin Li had to be the only pair of senior and junior who shared such an extraordinary relationship. Despite all the harsh condemnations, the legendary mage was not a bit angered by the young man. Instead, he took out his notebook and scribbled down all the words he heard. Oh, yes. I'm returning to Leaden Kingdom after we settle that crimson python. The descent of the reincarnation of darkness is extremely important to us. I have to go back to announce this crucial information. If you need anything, you can send people to Darkness Shrine to look for me. Alright. Hey, don't forget to help me tell in Los that I am really willing to join their side if they need a reincarnation too. Naturally, the ones who returned from the Scar of Death were treated differently. The 4 of them from the Tower of Dusk were each assigned a spacious and comfortable tent. While it could not compare to the one that Sendros stayed in, it was vastly different from what the other adventurers enjoyed. The 4 tents were all at the edge of the campsite. They were about a dozen meters apart from each other, neither too far apart nor too close together, clearly all Adalo's doing. The sun had just set, and the bustle had yet to die down at the campsite. The adventurers gathered around the campfires as they drank and ate, chatting with old friends and new acquaintances. However, not one of them dared to go near the 4 tents at the edge of the campsite, as they were closely guarded by 20 death knights who were dressed in black armor and armed with blades, looking like statues. The chilly death aura they gave out could be felt from a distance, and thus not a single adventurer was willing to bother them. Even the braver ones only stared from a distance before talking about it with their friends. Their conversations did not differ much in content. Lin Li and the rest who came back from the Scar of Death had been a popular topic of discussion ever since they returned. The adventurers discussed their origins, why they were given such exceptional treatment, and how powerful the black-armored Death Knights were. So diverse was the range of topics that it could have been compiled into a book. Meanwhile, the main topic of their discussion was now wrapped in a blanket as he studied the map on the table. It was the treasure map of the Immortal King. Lin Li had been studying it fervently ever since he returned from Sendro's place. Lin Li was someone who had seen many things, but after studying it for a good part of the day, he could barely even recognize the material the map was made of. It was delicate and smooth, and was neither paper nor leather, but not silk either. The map was squarish and about a meter in length. There were streets and houses depicted on it. As far as he could tell, it was a city he had never seen before. Apart from the pictures, the map was covered in fine, high elf's print, and it looked like there had to be at least 10,000 words. The high elf's print was known for being simple and concise, hence, many complicated spells had to be cast using high elf's print. If it were done using everyday speech, even chanting the spell would take days, and the mage would have died from exhaustion before the magic was even released. One could only imagine how much content 10,000 words of high elf's print contained. When Lin Li saw the map, covered in fine print, he was shocked, and thought that he had hit the jackpot. Who knew how many secrets he'd uncover after reading it all? But after reading it closely, he immediately cried foul. Damn it, is this a joke? There were thousands and thousands of high elf's print words, but none of it made any sense. This is simply incorrigible. Which bastard came up with this damn treasure map that was covered in thousands and thousands of high elf's print words? It would take half a day to even copy it down, yet there was not even a comprehensible sentence in the lot, not even a clue as to how the words were connected. Lin Li did not believe that it was entirely incomprehensible at first, and was determined to uncover the hidden message. Unfortunately, that did not end well, as he had only managed to decipher the meaning of a few commonly used words after spending half a night on it. That was how the high elf's print worked. There was only a few hundred words in the whole vocabulary, but each word had a different meaning depending on where it was used. In the case of the treasure map, there were thousands and thousands of words, but not a single complete sentence. Even if a true high elf was present, he would not fare much better than Lin Li. After a torturous night, Lin Li decided to give up, and tossed the high elf's print he had scribbled down aside as he decided to focus on studying the drawing on the map. After working on something else, Lin Li finally made a small breakthrough as he realized that the city depicted on the map seemed to differ from an average city. The layout of the city was overly complex as it was completely unnecessary in some places, but it seemed as though someone had insisted on building streets in a certain location even if it resulted in having to walk all the way around the city when the place they were heading to was only a few steps away. Of course, not all the streets were like that as it was only a few of them on the outskirts. However, Lin Li still realized the importance of it. Could it be that these streets signify something? Lin Li stared at the map for a long time before he suddenly discovered that there were quite a few towers in this city, and the strange winding streets linked all the towers together. My God, conquering Mageweth! Lin Li clapped his hands as he suddenly recalled a guru-level Mageweth. That was right, there were 36 towers on this map, and they coincided with the 36 magic nodes of the conquering Mageweth, while these strange intersecting streets formed a perfect magic circuit. If there was a source of mana as well, this would be a huge conquering Mageweth. Even amongst guru-level Mageweths, the conquering Mageweth was at the top. The inscribers in the Endless World even had a saying that if one completely mastered the conquering Mageweth, they would be able to touch a trace of the realm of the Divine Smith. Of course, that was an exaggeration. Lin Li had already completely mastered the conquering Mageweth, but he still knew nothing about the realm of the Divine Smith. However, this still went to show how important the conquering Mageweth was in the hearts of inscribers. The conquering Mageweth was commonly used in magical weapons, in the extremely powerful ones, at that. For instance, when Lin Li got a hold of the Stars of Fury in the Well of the Sun, he had personally drawn a conquering Mageweth on it, thanks to which the power of the Stars of Fury was intensified to an extreme. Not only did its attacks come with all kinds of magical attributes, it even allowed the Stars of Fury to combine with Lin Li as one so that Lin Li would be able to tap into its power anytime, anywhere. When the Conquering Mageweth was activated, Lin Li was the Stars of Fury, and the Stars of Fury was Lin Li. Lin Li was basically invincible then. But even the invincible Lin Li had never thought of using the Conquering Mageweth in a city. This was an insane plan. When the Conquering Mageweth was magnified and drawn in a town, every resident of the town would be able to combine themselves with the town and tap into its power anytime they wanted to. What kind of a concept was that? It was way scarier than a Lin Li who held the Stars of Fury. The Conquering Mageweth had a peculiar feature: the larger the area it spanned, the more powerful it was. This was because the Conquering Mageweth was drawn using WYRM's blood, and the blood of the WYRM itself was filled with terrifying power. Hence, the more WYRM's blood was used, the more powerful the Conquering Mageweth was. It was not an exaggeration to say that this Conquering Mageweth was capable of making every resident a living deity. What a lunatic! Lin Li stared wide-eyed at the map in his hands. This was something that only a lunatic could come up with. Looking at these intersecting streets and the 36 towers, even over 100 WYRMs would barely suffice if they all required WYRM's blood. In other words, hundreds of WYRMs would have to be killed in order to build a city like that. What kind of concept was that? Even during the prehistoric times when the Titans and WYRMs ruled over Anril, 100 WYRMs would have been a formidable force, one powerful enough to tear open the sky. Moreover, the amount of mana required for the Conquering Mageweth to operate was beyond what Lin Li could imagine. How many legendary magical crystals were needed to form the source of mana? What was the Eternal Furnace compared to a city like that? The life's work of Osric was merely a toy in front of such a city. As for Lin Li's Tower of Dusk, it was nowhere near a toy, but more like a negligible speck of dust in the air. This city would be invulnerable if it was ever built. Wait, unsinkable? When he thought of this, Lin Li drew a breath of cold air. Wasn't the Sky Castle supposed to be invulnerable? In the distant Dark Ages, the High Elves had combined forces to build 7 sky castles and ruled over the whole of Anril from them. Nobody knew how many attempts to take down the sky castles had been easily foiled over the long and gloomy era. It was only 1,300 years later, when the others could no longer stand the cruel rule of the High Elves, that they started a war, with the humans leading the rest. 6 of the once invulnerable sky castles fell, leaving the last remaining one lost between the cracks of time and space. Lin Li's hands trembled as he held the map as he stared closely at every building in the city. Time passed, but Lin Li felt more and more emotional as he looked. It was truly a miraculous city, and the wisdom of the High Elves was perfectly evident in it. Architecture, alchemy, epigraphy, engineering, and forging, almost every form of art was expressed in this city, the out-of-the-box thinking and the raw talent of them easily apparent. This city could only be described as miraculous. This was only what Lin Li could gather from the map. The true Sky Castle was probably worlds apart from this. I understand now. Lin Li finally put down the map after an entire hour, as he had finally understood this time. The Immortal King's treasure was hidden in the final Sky Castle. 6 Sky Castles had fallen during that war, but even after the war had ended, there was no news of the treasure. It was a war that took the whole Anril by storm, and nothing was spared from it, not even a 3-eyed demon wolf living in a ditch. A war of that caliber had no secrets to speak of, as every minute detail would be recorded down in history, much less the Immortal King's treasure. Even the god of mages Juresco was unable to hide the fact that he had taken it for himself. In the end, the last Sky Castle fell through the cracks between time and space with the Immortal King's treasure in it. That was the only logical explanation. This is it, Lin Li paced around the tent uncontrollably after setting down the map on the table as he repeated the same thing to himself over and over again. This map was worth far more than the Immortal King's treasure to Lin Li. This was because Lin Li knew that the map on table was the blueprint of the last Sky Castle. After all, however precious it was, the Immortal King's treasure was merely an intangible existence. Even if one found enough clues to lead them to it, they would still have to enter the cracks between time and space in order to have a chance to look for the last sky castle. That was the realm of the spirits, and even if someone from the sanctuary realm forced their way in, they would be shredded instantly due to the distortion. The blueprint of the sky castle was much more practical in comparison. It was tangible, after all, and given enough time and resources, he might even be able to build another sky castle based on this blueprint. Of course, it would be unimaginably difficult. In Lin Li's opinion, building another sky castle would not be much less challenging than to enter the crack between time and space. First of all, it was going to take too long. The High Elves prided themselves on being living gods and the most perfect beings in the whole of Amril, but even they had taken more than 1,000 years to build 7 sky castles. Let me see how long it's going to take if it was me. Lin Li looked at his fingers and his toes before coming to a conclusion that it would be better if he just used his hair to count. Then there was the problem of procuring materials. Everything else aside, just the fact that it required the blood of 100 WYRMS would be enough to drive anyone from the sanctuary realm insane. But to Lin Li, the worst thing was that the blueprint in his hands was not complete. If he guessed correctly, the High Elf's print also included instructions for constructing the sky castle apart from clues about the last sky castle. Unfortunately, the person who crafted the map was some lunatic who scattered the most crucial content. Lin Li could hardly even piece together a sentence, much less find the way to build a sky castle. Indeed, this blueprint was filled with all kinds of flaws, like taking too long, requiring insane materials to build, and also missing keywords. It was impossible to build a sky castle based on it. But even then, the blueprint was immeasurably valuable to Lin Li. This was because Lin Li himself was a miraculous existence, the only one in the world who was a guru of all 5 trades. There was a lot that Lin Li could gain from this incomplete blueprint, and while he would not be able to recreate the glory of the sky castle, there were many aspects that could be applied in the Tower of Dusk and even to the Eternal Furnace. Even 10% of the skills would be sufficient to make the Tower of Dusk and the Eternal Furnace unmatched in the breezy plains. Of course, Lin Li was probably the only one in the whole Amril who had the ability to make use of the blueprint, as the skills needed to build the sky castle were too advanced. Almost every aspect was at least at the guru level, and the areas involved spanned from inscription to architecture to alchemy and metallurgy. Any of them would require a lifetime of studying for anyone else, so who else besides Lin Li, who was naturally a guru in all these aspects, would be able to showcase the skills needed to build the sky castle? Hence, Lin Li was not worried about the Manhwa family at all. So what if Adalo made a copy of the blueprint? They would find themselves on one hell of a ride trying to figure out the conquering mage with, much less make use of the skills on this blueprint. Which one of them was beneath guru level? If there'd been such an able figure in the Manhwa family, Cheyenne would not have foolishly been injured at the altar all those years ago. Then again, if the Manhwa family had such a figure, Lin Li would not mind working with them either, as this blueprint was an endless treasure, and it would be better to enjoy it with someone than to spend his entire life working on it. There was a limit to how powerful one person could be, after all. Of course, he would have to ensure that the Manhwa family would listen to him before he decided to work with them. Besides, the High Elf's print here was the most crucial, and he had to find a way to decipher it. Even a few words would be great. He would be able to uncover more advanced skills with just those few words. Seems like I will have to pay teacher a visit. I wonder how are his pharmaceutical skills now, Lin Li mumbled to himself while he carefully rolled up the blueprint lying on the table before placing it back in the ring of endless storm. When this was done, the sky had just begun to brighten, and Lin Li finally felt sleep coming. Thus, he wrapped himself in the blanket and fell asleep at the table. He was woken up by the sound of frantic footsteps the next day. Lin Li only realized that there was hardly anyone left in the campsite after he got up and looked around. Besides the Death Knights who continued to stand guard where they were, there were only a few adventurers who had overslept just like he did, now hurriedly packing up their things. From their panicked expressions, it seemed as though there was danger knocking at their doors. I've been stood up. Lin Li understood what had happened the minute he saw how empty the place was. Young Master Hutton of the Manhwa family was a rare talent indeed. He knew when to let things go when needed, which was exactly what he did to Lin Li and Sendros the minute he realized that things had spiraled out of his control. There was not an ounce of hesitation, and while it left the other bewildered, they could not help but to admire him for it too. After all, it was not only Lin Li that he left behind, but Sendros too. How many would be willing to leave behind someone as powerful as Sendros? Sendros could probably deal with anything in the Blackstone Mountains, besides Black Dragon that was said to have been trapped at the peak, but Hutton was willing to. Lin Li could probably guess what Hutton was thinking. They had all started holding a grudge against each other from the moment Vanscore struck, and while Lin Li had yet to strike, who knew if he would not do so in the future? Keeping him in the Manhwa family's team was like carrying around a ticking time bomb. Besides, Lin Li's relationship with Sendros meant that if he chose to strike, Sendros would definitely help him. By then, it would be too late for Hutton to regret. But, if he left both of them behind, the situation would take on a different turn. It was like taking on a stance of sorts, one that showed he was backing off and saying, all right, it was wrong of me to let Vanscore ambush you yesterday, and I have realized my mistake. I can't afford to offend you, and now I'm going to avoid you, so please forgive me for my mistake. Hutton had given him a way out. If Lin Li did not want to ruin his relationship with the Manhwa family entirely, he would drop this matter. Otherwise, it would be unreasonable of him. It would seem as though Hutton had suffered a huge loss, giving up someone as powerful as Sendros, but in hindsight, he had in fact made a huge gain. He removed 2 ticking time bombs from the team before any danger eventuated, and even used it as an opportunity to apologize and reconcile such that they would be too embarrassed to bring it up even when they met in the future. This young Master Hutton was something else indeed. He was much better than those who did not know when to put a stop to something, or worse, the fools who laughed unaware that they were facing imminent danger. Oh well, I will let it slide on Cheyenne's account. Lin Li laughed and shook his head. Since Hutton had already gone so far as to avoid any conflict, it would not be nice of him to pursue it further. The Tower of Dusk had just established itself in the breezy plains. It was not wise to offend a legendary mage so early on. Just as he was thinking of sending a few death knights to wake Ujfalusi and the rest, Sendros suddenly walked into his tent with Rena, Norfeller, Ujfalusi, and the rest behind him. The old man stared coldly at the campsite, and started explaining before Lin Li could even open his mouth to speak. They left in the morning. Your men wanted to wake you, but I stopped them. The Tower of Dusk has just been established, and there are other things you should do than fight it out with Cheyenne. That is no wise thing to do. I understand. Right, the Crimson Python. Let's go now. Lin Li did not hesitate at all. He was all right with letting Hutton off, and he did not care for the Crimson Python's magical crystal, either. When it came to the dragon's tongue, however, he was hell-bent on getting it. A stalk of dragon's tongue could be used to concoct 10 bottles of rune potion. If used well, it could produce 10 archmages at once. What did that mean? It meant that the meager manpower of the Tower of Dusk could be doubled. The 5 of them packed their things and led the 18 Death Knights out of the empty campsite. Sendros seemed to be in a good mood as they traveled, and even discussed necromagic with Ujfalusi. One of them was a legendary level necromancer, while the other had once been a level 20 lich, so both of them stood at the peak of necromagic in the whole of Amril. Naturally, there was much for them to talk about. Lin Li took the crystal ball that solidified the warlock's eyes from his pocket, and gave an order to another team from the Tower of Dusk. They were to get to the Crimson Python's nest before noon to meet with him. Right. Felik, where did you get these Death Knights from? After chatting with Ujfalusi for a while, Sendros suddenly became interested in the 18 Death Knights who led the way in front of him. I summoned them in the Scar of Death. There were over 30 of them at first, but we've met with battles, and now there is about half of them left. That's a pity indeed, but you're lucky anyway. Sendros's voice was laced with a tinge of envy. I wanted to summon a group of them, but a pity that these guys are too stubborn, and would not listen to anybody but the Retribution Knight, even disregarding the hierarchy rules of undead creatures. Why would you do that? These fellows look menacing, but they are only mediocre in terms of abilities. You're a legendary mage. What is there that you cannot do? They would only drag you down. Don't belittle them, they may not be high in level like the group you have here. The highest is probably level 18, while the lowest is perhaps level 15, and they may not be as useful as humorous WYRM in battle, but don't forget, they were powerful warriors and knights when they were alive, and have the ability to evolve. They have much more to gain from swallowing soul fires than other undead creatures. You have 18 of them now, right? If you allow them to swallow soul fire as they please, you might even end up with 18 retribution knights. Are retribution knights? Lin Li stared blankly. That was like having 18 legendary powerhouses who would never betray him. With them, he could basically rule over the whole Amrel. Of course, that was likely to be an arduous endeavor, as the process of evolving by consuming soul fire for undead creatures was one that could drive anyone insane. Even if what Sendros said was true, that the Death Knights had far more to gain from consuming soul fire than other undead creatures, how much more could they stand to gain? Even if it was 10 times more. From his calculation, even if it was the level 18 Death Knight he was speaking of, and he evolved 10 times faster than other undead creatures, he would still have to consume 1,000 level 15 corpses to reach level 19. Of course, if there was a chance that he could consume a humorous WYRM, there was a possibility that he could surpass level 19. But, how many humorous WYRMs were there in Amrel for him to consume? However, just because the process was tedious, it did not mean that it was impossible, as given enough time and enough undead creatures, these Death Knight would all definitely become Retribution Knights. That was the scariest part. Most mages would never surpass the legendary realm, as they were confined by their talent. No matter how much they tried, there was no way they could break into the legendary realm even if they could live forever, and that was the biggest difference separating them from Death Knights. If what Sendros said was true, then these 18 Death Knights were all geniuses who could break into the legendary realm. Isn't this too big of a joke? You think I'm joking with you? Death Knights are the most unusual existence amongst undead creatures. Just go flip through the books yourself. You think the Retribution Knights of Amrel simply appeared out of nowhere? It is only through endless battles and endless consuming that they may become Retribution Knights. However, there were merely a dozen or so Retribution Knights throughout the entire history of Amrel. That's because there can only be one Retribution Knight amongst the Death Knights, and when that one Retribution Knight appears, all the other Death Knights will give up on their evolution. They will give up all the power they derive from consuming soul fire to that one Retribution Knight, and that is why every Retribution Knight to ever appear in Amrel has been terrifyingly powerful. When Sendros got to this, he sighed with envy. That is why I said you're lucky. You now have complete control over these 18 Death Knights, and you're the only Retribution Knight to them. Even if the real Retribution Knight appears, they will still listen to you. Moreover, you can allow them to continue consuming and evolving, and one day, you'll have a scary team comprised of Retribution Knights. That day seems pretty far away. Of course, before that happens, you have another problem to solve. It seemed as though Sendros did not hear Lin Li's complaints as he continued in his rough voice. When one of them nears level 20, you should be careful. The Death Knights will be able to sense that one of them is about to break through, and will try to stop it from happening. You might have to face a true Retribution Knight and his army of thousands of Death Knights then. After Sendros said that, Lin Li nearly suffered a heart attack. A level 20 Retribution Knight and his army of thousands of Death Knights? Even the legendary Sendros would run away in fear, so how was he going to face them? Thank goodness this was all far away in the future, as the most powerful Death Knight he had was only level 18. Who knew when he would consume enough soul fire to reach level 20? If Lin Li was unlucky and could not live to Anduin's age, he might not even live to see the Retribution Knight appear. If you can summon a Retribution Knight, that will be even more perfect, as the Death Knights will be twice as powerful with a Retribution Knight leading them. Lin Li rolled his eyes at that as he thought how this fellow could speak with no qualms at all. Even summoning a group of Death Knights almost cost me my life, how am I going to summon a Retribution Knight? Why don't you do it instead? Right, Sendros was particularly helpful today. Could it be the Death Knights? After he closely reminded Lin Li what he should look out for, he reached into his pockets, retrieved a sheepskin map, and gave it to him. This is the blueprint for a black front fortress, take it. What's a black front fortress? It's a campsite specifically designed for Death Knights. You're a president, after all, and your actions will be closely watched. These 18 Death Knights will attract too much attention, so you cannot place them at the Tower of Dusk. My suggestion is that you build a black front fortress near the Tower of Dusk and leave them there. The good thing about it is that it can convert mana into death aura, and will strengthen the Death Knights while speeding up their absorption of soul fire. Lin Li scratched his head, and asked, "Why are you suddenly so nice to me?" He knew what Sendros was like, after all, and while they were always on good terms, he was never like today, giving him advice voluntarily, and even gifting him something as valuable as the blueprint of a black front fortress. This was not a blueprint of any random black front fortress, but one that could convert mana into death aura, and would be useful for any undead creature, not just Death Knights. The extent to which a necromancer could use this was unimaginable, so why would Sendros give it to him? I dug this out from a grave, and have kept it for over 30 years. Unfortunately, I did not have the chance to summon real Death Knights, so it has merely been lying around. Since you're lucky and were able to summon so many Death Knights, I'll give it to you as a gift. As they left the campsite, they hardly met with any trouble. Of course, nothing much could be considered trouble for Sendros. When they encountered magical beasts, he did not even lift his finger, and merely summoned undead creatures to tear them into pieces. After they scaled another mountain, Lin Li retrieved the map from his pocket. They were very close to the Crimson Python's nest. Judging from the map, it was at most another 2 hours of travel left. Just as he wanted to let the team rest, the crystal ball in his pocket started letting out violent magical waves. Lin Li hurriedly retrieved the crystal ball from his pocket, and saw a flustered Gavin appear. "Gavin, what is it?" Lin Li knew Gavin well. He was always calm and cautious, and never looked this flustered no matter what happened. "President Felix, we were attacked." "Who was it?" "My apologies, President Felix, we have no idea." "Tell me what exactly happened." It's like this, President Felix," Gavin panted heavily before he started recounting what had happened. It was nothing complicated, actually. Jirian and Gavin had led the mages of the Tower of Dusk quickly to the Crimson Python's nest as Lin Li instructed them to do. However, they soon realized that there were other adventurers there as well. This was not something strange, as magical beasts roamed the Blackstone Mountains, and it naturally was a place adventurers came to seek wealth. Hence, both Jirian and Gavin did not pay much attention to them, and merely sent a magical signal as a greeting as per the usual practice of adventurers. Who knew that that would be the start of a tragedy? Before anyone had time to react, numerous magical attacks and arrows came flying towards them and injured a dozen mages there and then. Luckily, Jirian and Gavin realized something was amiss, and immediately ordered the group to flee, thus avoiding further casualties. Who in the world would dare do that? Lin Li almost burst out in anger upon hearing that. His own mages, attacked by a group of adventurers somewhere less than a 2-hour journey away from him. No idea. Never mind, as long as nobody's dead, that's all that matters. Find a place to hide and don't fight with them for now. Wait till I'm there before doing anything else. After rushing through his instructions for Gavin, Lin Li shoved the crystal ball back into his pocket, and turned to face Sendros. "The rest from the guild met with some trouble, we have to hurry over there." "All right." Following Lin Li's orders, Uchfalusi conjured up a levitation spell, while Norfeller turned into a bat. Rena also summoned her unicorn, and the 18 Death Knights rode on their shapeshifters, reaching the Crimson Python's nest in less than half an hour instead of a journey that would have taken 2 hours. With his incredibly sensitive mental strength as a level 19 archmage, Lin Li quickly detected the magical waves his men emitted. The mages of the Tower of Dusk were hiding amongst the dense bushes then, and perhaps because they had just met with an attack, they seemed slightly sheepish. Those who were more heavily injured even needed the support of others as they could not stand at all. Jirian was unharmed save for the obvious charred marks on his grey robes and the sweaty dirt streaks on his round face. He was panting heavily while he cursed away at the damned adventurers. Gavin, on the other hand, looked calm as he settled those who were injured before sending out about 10 warlocks' eyes to survey the surroundings. After this was done, he divided the remaining mages into 2 groups to take turns patrolling. He was a man of talent indeed. While he was not very powerful and lacked leadership abilities, he was very meticulous, and almost always made sure he did not leave any loopholes. After making sure that he did not miss even a single loophole, Gavin sighed before he leaned against a tree tiredly. Gavin. Just then, a familiar figure emerged from amongst the trees, with an unfamiliar old man following closely behind. "You're finally here, President Felix." Gavin heaved a sigh of relief, and went to welcome him happily, at the same time wondering why that old man seemed to have an aura of danger. Lin Li did not bother doing the introductions after he emerged from amongst the trees. He asked about the situation immediately. "How's the situation?" "Very bad. God knows where these adventurers came from. They're large in numbers, and powerful as well. I fought with one of them as we were retreating, and he was an archmage of at least level 16. There seems to be more than one level 16 archmage too. According to Mr. Jirian, there are at least 4 of them." Gavin looked concerned. "To be honest, President Felix, I really doubt whether they are actually adventurers. They seem more like a private corps sent by one of the strong powers out there." "Why do you say so?" "Logically speaking, adventurers will not attack unnecessarily, as there isn't a mercenary corps in the breezy plains that is powerful enough to do as they please as of yet. They will be in huge trouble if they offend anyone not to be trifled with. We already showed them that we meant no harm earlier, but they still went ahead with their attack and even pursued us as we were retreating, looking for clues of our whereabouts nearby the whole time. It seems as though they were out for blood." You've got a point there." Lin Li nodded his head as Gavin did make some sense. Mercenary corps had always stressed keeping peace with each other so that they could all make a living. This meant that they would never deeply offend any other force unless absolutely necessary. After all, no matter how powerful the mercenary corps was, they would find it hard to make a living if they made too many enemies. They might really be a private corps sent by a strong power somewhere out there. But who were they? Lin Li scratched his head before he paused suddenly. Could it be the Manhwa family? Upon further thought, he realized that this could be a possibility. Who else but they would have the ability to hire at last 4 level 16 archmages. Moreover, the young master in charge even went to the trouble of luring the Crimson Python to Black Cloud's town. It seemed like the Manhwa family could really be after the Crimson Python. Isn't this too much of a coincidence? Lin Li brushed his nose, thinking that Hutton could not be that unlucky to have gone through all the trouble of avoiding him and giving up a helper as powerful as Sendros only to bump into him again. Furthermore, he was unlucky enough to have injured people from the Tower of Dusk. If the Manhwa family was really behind this, they could not blame him for taking revenge. "President Felix," Gavin quietly reminded him, seeing Lin Li remain silent for so long. "We have already been hiding in the forest for some time as there were too many people. They will probably be here soon. Do you think we should shift our location?" "Shift our location?" Lin Li glanced at Gavin in doubt. "I mean to retreat." Lin Li did not even say anything this time as he turned to Sendros. "Do you think Hutton could be so unlucky?" "How would I know?" Sendros gave Lin Li a look, and hurriedly said, "I am short on time now and still have to return to the Darkness Shrine after helping you get rid of the Crimson Python. Quickly settle everything and don't waste my time. If there is really someone after us, then just kill all of them." Gavin was still wondering who this old man was, and almost choked when he heard what Sendros said out of the blue. Just kill all of them. Who was this old man, and why was he so sure of himself? Did he not hear a word Gavin had just said? There were at least 4 level 16 archmages and at least a dozen or so warriors and bandits above level 15. Even the Tower of Dusk had to retreat in front of such a powerful group. Who does this old man think he is? A legendary mage? Alright, Lin Li thought about it and decided not to waste any more time on this. He nodded in agreement and called Gavin over. Gavin, gather everyone. Yes, President. Even though Gavin still had doubts, he did not dare go against Lin Li's words. He had stayed at the Tower of Dusk long enough to know that President Felix was resourceful in his own ways. Gavin quickly gathered everyone. There were 26 magic shooters, 28 people in total, including Jirian and Gavin. Having been in a fight earlier, there were cuts all over them, but none too serious. Lin Li quickly spotted a disheveled Jirian sitting in the midst of the crowd. Jirian, my good sir, you're not that young anymore, so why would you join in the fight? Look at how charred you look. You're not hurt, right? You little bastard, how dare you look down on me? I'm not even 60 yet. Watch me, I'll be equally active even 10 years from now. It was futile to try and talk over it with this old man. Lin Li shook his head as he retrieved a few bottles of recovery potion from his pocket, intending to have Gavin pass them to the injured mages, but suddenly heard the sound of footsteps coming from the forest. The originally calm forest suddenly became chaotic as the frenzied sounds of footsteps and shouts broke the tranquility. Lin Li could also feel powerful magical waves in the sky moving towards the forest at an alarming speed. That's fast, of course, no matter how powerful the magical waves were, they were only rushing to their death with Sendros here. Lin Li paid no heed to them, and merely gave the forest a look before he gave Gavin the potion bottles. Let those who are injured drink it. Oh, Gavin hesitated, and then left with the potion bottles. Then, Lin Li saw a group of people run into the forest. The person leading them was a warrior who looked to be in his 30s. He wore an armor of red and black, and wielded a sword shining red. A large ruby was sitting on his finger, emitting red-hot magical waves. Even Lin Li could tell that his magical equipment was of good quality, and would easily fetch tens of thousands of gold coins at the Gilded Rose. This man was pretty decent in abilities too, and from what Lin Li could tell, he was probably around level 17. He was probably comparable to the two warriors who had been guarding Adalo at the Scar of Death. There were about 50 people following behind this warrior, all warriors and bandits from level 10 to level 15. They moved orderly, and one could tell at a glance that they were a trained group and might even have trained together for a long time. Even a fool would know that they were no adventurers. There were now over 50 people in the once empty forest, and it suddenly appeared crowded. In order to give himself some space, Lin Li had to take a few steps back. Ha, I'm in luck, I found all of you so quickly. The leading warrior saw the magic shooters the minute he entered, and a sinister smile appeared on his face immediately. Who exactly are you? Lin Li could not help but frown when he saw them run into the forest. They looked unfamiliar, and did not seem to be from the Manhwa family. Could he be wrong? Damn it, you bastards run pretty fast indeed. To think I've had to chase after you for so long. He seemed to know the abilities of the people from the Tower of Dusk after crossing hands with them earlier, and did not bother to strike immediately. Instead, he continued rambling on before looking at Lin Li in disdain. Who the heck are you? I'm Felix, Lin Li replied honestly before he turned over to Gavin and the rest. Their president. I have no intention to do anything besides asking how they have offended you. Why did you attack them out of the blue? Stop messing around with me. Since the bastard Manhwa family sent you here, surely they've told you why you're here? If not, then blame it on your bad luck. Well, I guess it doesn't matter even if you know. You see, my mission is to kill anyone who dares come near the cave. So if you must, go blame it on the bastards of the Manhwa family for sending you to your death, but not telling you what is it about. Lin Li frowned. It seemed like the Manhwa family was not behind the attack on Gavin and the rest. He brushed his nose sheepishly at this, embarrassed about the fact that he had wrongly accused Hutton. Just then, Lin Li heard Gavin's sudden exclamation. You're from the Dark Blade? How could you tell? Even though Gavin saw through them, the warrior did not bother refuting his claim, and even looked somewhat proud. Well, the Dark Blade did have something to be proud of. The Dark Blade was the most powerful bandit group in the whole Breezy Plains, and even in the whole Felon kingdom for the last hundreds of years. The Sire bandits were merely lowly thugs in comparison with the Dark Blade, and could have been exterminated by the Dark Blade if only the latter so wished. Even Vanscore would be considered mediocre in the Dark Blade. It was said that the Dark Blade was headed by 3 legendary powerhouses, just like the Glittergold Trade Union. It was just that they were much more mysterious in comparison to the bosses of the Glittergold Trade Union, as people had yet to see all 3 of them at once. Actually, for the past 100 or so years, the Dark Blade had moved on from being just a bandit group. They had influence over the whole Breezy Plains, and had more than 10,000 members, hence, they never resorted to robbing. However, that did not mean that they would have trouble getting money. It was quite the opposite for them, actually. At their level of influence, they did not have to resort to robbing. Instead, their reputation alone was enough for businesses to offer them protection money and bribes. Even big names like the Glittergold Trade Union would work with them occasionally to prevent unnecessary trouble. Of course, in exchange, the Dark Blade sent men to protect these businesses, and even to escort them sometimes so as to deter foolish bandits from eyeing their wealth. Their annual earnings alone were more than what the Sire bandits made in a decade. On top of that, they had ventured into different fields and almost every business. So vast was their wealth that perhaps even the Glittergold Trade Union would not dare belittle them. Their abilities were even more astounding as they were the Manhwa family's biggest enemy since they were situated in Aminia as well. All the conflicts that happened between them in the past few hundred years resulted in a deep feud between the 2 powerful forces. However, even though the Manhwa family basically controlled Aminia, they still could not do anything about the Dark Blade. In fact, the Dark Blade had gained an upper hand for a period of time, and if not for Cheyenne suddenly breaking into the legendary realm, the Manhwa family would have become a myth a long time ago. Gavin couldn't help frowning as soon as he thought of the Dark Blade's reputation, sighing as he thought that President Felix was simply too stubborn for being such a fine young man. He was young, after all, and did not know the virtue of holding back his anger. That was such a great opportunity for them to escape, but it seemed that would be nearly impossible now. Alright, enough of this nonsense. I will send you on your way so that I can finish my work for the day. The warrior seemed to have lost his patience as he waved at the men behind his back without turning back. Finish them off. Remember to be quick, or else young master will be mad. Why so impatient? Lin Li shook his head in pity seeing the warrior so impatient. Despite his pity, the over 50 people behind the warrior still came charging at them. One could definitely tell that they were a trained unit now as they were able to stand in a formation surrounding the mages of the Tower of Dusk even in such a confined space. The warrior wielding the huge sword started moving, and all they could see was red light. With the help of his combat energy, the level 17 warrior moved at an astounding speed, and a scorching hot aura charged towards them along with a shining red light. It only took a fraction of a second for the red-hot sword to come flying down on Lin Li's head. Oh no! Gavin's heart sank as he watched the sword fall. He thought that President Felix was really in trouble this time. How could he forget the huge taboo for mages, going too close to a high-ranking warrior's weapon? He was basically courting death. Unfortunately, it was too late for him to remind Lin Li as Gavin watched the sword land. However, he soon realized that there was no blood splattering where the sword landed, but only a crisp sound as blinding sparks flew. It was as if the sword landed on a sturdy block of steel instead of flesh. What? Gavin's eyes were as round as saucers as he realized that there were 4 rapidly spinning solar spheres flying around the young president. My God, elemental shield. A level 19 Archmage elemental shield. Gavin was in shock looking at the 4 solar spheres. He thought he was seeing things for a moment. How could this President Felix be human? His level rose at such an alarming speed that it could only be described as otherworldly. When he'd first joined the Tower of Dusk, President Felix was only at level 17, but during the attack of the Crimson Python in Black Cloud's town, he became level 18. Then, he suddenly became a level 19 only after a few days. Gavin wondered if this freak would suddenly break through to the legendary realm if he closed his eyes for a moment. Gavin then thought he understood why this President Felix could remain so calm in the face of danger. A level 19 archmage was indeed so powerful that even the top bandit organization in the breezy plains with 3 leaders at the legendary realm would not easily offend him. He was, after all, a level 19 archmage who was just a step away from the legendary realm, and even a legendary powerhouse could not be certain to kill him. If he survived, there would be more trouble if he sought revenge. Of course, that was what Gavin believed. He would never have thought that the situation was far more insane than he thought. That was because he did not understand something. A lunatic would only be insane because there was an even crazier lunatic by his side. A curse left Sendro's mouth just as Lin Li conjured up the elemental shield, and an intense death aura started spreading through the space. The world seemed to have been covered by a shadow then, as the green forest that was once brimming with life suddenly looked sinister and dark. A bone-chilling cold filled the air, and devastating cries could be heard. Even the sky seemed to be covered by gloomy clouds. My God, Gavin had already been scared out of his mind by the elemental shield, and the death aura that filled the space now nearly gave him a heart attack. The instant the clouds covered the sky, Gavin immediately understood the old man's origins. He was a legendary mage. He was definitely a legendary mage well-versed in necromagic. Gavin was even willing to bet his life on that. He had only ever felt magical wave of such caliber in the library of Dooland, from the owner of the library Basil himself. Needless to say, the warrior leading the Dark Blades group was much more taken aback than Gavin, who was already familiar with Lin Li. While he did not showcase any elaborate techniques in wielding his sword earlier, he prided himself on the simplicity of his techniques. Moreover, he had moved closer to them in order to speak. Why else would he have walked so near to someone who was bound to die? The moment he struck, they were merely a dozen meters apart. The warrior was sure that his strike would land true. He had never once missed while attacking from such a close distance. Coupled with his combat energy that was particularly effective at penetrating magic shields, even if he was faced with a much more powerful archmage, he would be able to slice him in two. However, it seemed as though his sword had struck a rock. Sparks flew, but there was no splatter of blood that he'd pictured. What's going on? Seeing that he missed, the warrior became stunned. After he calmed down and took a closer look, he realized that there were 4 solar spheres revolving around the young mage. Bloody hell, it's a level 19 archmage. The warrior was from the Dark Blade, after all, so once he saw the solar spheres, he realized that he was facing a powerful opponent. But it was too late. The second the warrior struck the elemental shield, Sendros had just finished chanting, and before the warrior could even raise his sword to strike again, thousands of vengeful spirits emerged from a black fog. Their distraught looks and chilly cries made it seem like they were in the depths of hell. The second they emerged from the black fog, they made a beeline for those alive like sharks chasing the scent of blood. In an instant, the forest was filled with the cries of terror. The vengeful spirits were an obscure existence, and were merely an amalgamation of vengefulness. While they resembled spirits in characteristics, they were far more aggressive, and although they feared the holy light and magic, they were practically immune to physical damage. If warriors and bandits wished to harm them, they would have to possess incredibly powerful combat energy or an extravagant magical weapon. The people of the Dark Blade were all around level 15, and the combat energy they had was nothing to the vengeful spirits. Moreover, they only had about a dozen magical weapons, and that was simply not enough for them to use against the vengeful spirits. Besides that, Sendros had used a level 20,000 souls spell on them and summoned thousands of vengeful spirits at once. Even the level 17 warrior leading the group might not be able to escape unscathed. The rest was not so lucky, and even dying with dignity had become a luxury. The countless vengeful spirits swarmed over in the hundreds the second they detected a trace of life. In an instant, all everyone could see was the splatter of blood and flesh, a sinister laughter, and the sounds of tearing and pathetic cries permeated the air. Adding on to the fact that the ground was now covered with blood, it was quite appropriate to describe the setting as hell on earth. The massacre merely lasted 3 minutes before the forest quieted down. Sendros remained in his place with no expression on his pale face. Even the folds of his long robe did not appear to have moved at all. Nobody would have thought from the way he looked that this seemingly innocent old man had killed dozens of Dark Blade's members in merely 3 minutes. Just kill all of them. That was what Sendros said, and that was what he did. None of the 50-odd members of the Dark Blade had been spared by Sendros's Thousand Souls spell. Oh, wait. Someone survived, it was the warrior leading them. However, he did not survive because he was powerful enough to survive the Thousand Souls spell. It was because of Lin Li's words. Don't kill this one, I want to ask him something. And now, the warrior leader who'd managed to escape was vomiting non-stop in a puddle of blood. He was pale and trembling, the mind-numbing sounds of vomiting made it seem as though he might throw up his intestines as well. Lin Li stared quietly, and didn't bother to stop him from vomiting, because he knew that this unlucky guy was terrified of Sendros. He was lying there and throwing up not because he found the sight disgusting, but rather because he was unconsciously trying to release his fear. He only stopped throwing up after 10 minutes, but he was still pale and trembling, while his eyes were glazed over. He looked just like a walking corpse, and even in this state, he was still subconsciously wary of looking up to look at Sendros. Alright, get up. I have some questions for you. Lin Li slowly walked to him only after he stopped throwing up. Yes, the warrior had lost all of his previous arrogance, and looked like his soul had left his body, only nodding mechanically when Lin Li asked him a question. I already told you not to hurry. If you could last a few minutes more in front of a legendary mage, wouldn't that be something you could be proud of? Why hurry to your death? Lin Li could not help feeling indignant on seeing the state that the warrior was in. This old man was too much, why did he have to use such a gory method? Now that the only survivor has been scared out of his mind, how am I going to ask him questions? Lin Li gave the enemy leader an exasperated look and gritted his teeth before giving him a bottle of peace bloom extract. Peace bloom extract had the effect of calming the mind, and even if it was not made into a potion, it was still sufficient to treat this unlucky warrior. After taking a small bottle, the warrior finally looked better, and was not trembling as badly as earlier. However, as he looked up and made eye contact with Sendros, he still recoiled as though he had been bitten. Alright, stop coiling into a ball like you're a rope of some sort. I'm going to ask you a few questions, and if you can give me satisfactory answers, I'll let you return alive. You will bring a message for me. Of course, if you don't give me satisfactory answers, you'll still be bringing back a few words for me, but it'll be your corpse doing the work. You know a necromancer has many ways to deal with a corpse, right? Go. Go ahead. The survivor could not help throwing up again when he heard the mention of a corpse. Why are you here in the Blackstone Mountains? How many people do you have, and who is leading them? How powerful is the most powerful person you have? Alright, that's about it. You'd better think about it before answering. I don't tolerate wrong answers. Actually, Lin Li had been somewhat worried at the start, worried that he would need to expend a lot of effort before he could find out the truth from this warrior leader, but he had not expected that Sendros would give him a surprise. He immediately used the cruelest and bloodiest Thousand Soul spell and scared that poor warrior until he went mad. The warrior's psychological defenses were totally crushed, and interrogation became much easier. Lin Li did not even use much effort, and already managed to get the information he wanted. The warrior answered while trembling with fear, yet Lin Li whispered a thank you to Sendros. It was because Lin Li knew that Sendros' Thousand Soul spell was used to help him. Although the old man was one of the most vicious necromancers, he was not some merciless demon king. In fact, when one had reached the level of those like Lin Li and Sendros, killing was not so simple. They no longer willfully slaughtered just to satisfy their thirst for blood, but they would not be irresolute and hesitant because of their virtue and morals either. To them, killing was just a method to strike fear into their enemies. Just like Lin Li had done in the Demon Fall Valley and Scar of Death, a single spell caused hundreds to lose their lives. If it was an average person, they would feel that their body and hands were filled with sin. However, in Lin Li's mind, this was merely a method to continue surviving. If he had not used 1,000 miles of ice on hundreds of bandits in the Demon Fall Valley, the second Shadow's Nest would have definitely emerged from one of those ambitious forces in Gerosis, causing the Emerald Tower to be in danger at any given time or place. It was the same at the border of the Scar of Death. Although Lin Li had looked composed, he was afraid on the inside. Who would not be afraid after being watched by a gigantic entity such as the Manhwa family? Hence, Lin Li had to use Vanscore's death to warn Hutton that if it were to happen again, the next person to die could be Hutton himself. Facts also proved that Lin Li was right. The destruction of the Shadow's Nest caused all of the forces of Gerosis to submit. So far, there was not a single force that dared to disrespect the Emerald Tower. Vanscore's death had also similarly allowed Hutton to feel Lin Li's ruthlessness. Otherwise, he would not have stood up Lin Li and Sendros on the next day. It was the same for Sendros' thousand-soul spell. After being driven mad with fear by the thousand-soul spell, the surviving warrior leader did not dare to hide anything. He answered whatever questions Lin Li asked. He simply said everything he knew, and he said it without reserve. He held nothing back and told them everything he knew. The overall situation was not far from Lin Li's conjecture. Indeed, the strongest band of bandits in the breezy plains, the Dark Blade, had 3 legendary powerhouses in command. They had also followed the Manhwa family's footsteps and arrived in the breezy plains. It was just that there was only one difference from the Manhwa family. The Manhwa family had recruited hundreds of adventurers to use them as cannon fodder, and they killed their way through. Whereas for Dark Blade, they only sent forth a contingent of 100 or more men, and they used a route that only they knew to reach the peak of the Blackstone Mountains without a single battle. Based on numbers, it would seem that the Dark Blade was in a disadvantageous position. After all, this time the Manhwa family had hundreds of sacrificial pawns. The total number could even reach 1,000 if their own men were added in. As for the Dark Blade, they only had over 100 men. But in terms of combat ability, the Dark Blade was not on the losing end. They could even be stronger than the Manhwa family. Based on what this warrior said, the 50-odd men that he'd led had the worst abilities in the whole contingent. Other than himself, the others only had combat abilities of level 15 and below. It was also because of this that he had been ordered to just keep a lookout in the vicinity of the Crimson Python's nest this time. Other than this group, the combat prowess of the other 100 men was not average at all. At least 50 were powerhouses above level 15, and the strongest among them were 10 level 18 archmages. The one in charge of commanding these 10 level 18 archmages was a genius mage, Sing, who was as famous as Hutton. Upon hearing that this Sing was equally famous as Hutton, Lin Li was rather curious. He knew of Hutton's magical talents. Hutton was at the peak of level 17 before his 30s, and this was achieved by him while being busy attending to the family's matters. Even that Gryffindor, who was developed with priority, was somewhat worse than Hutton. Just what was the background of this Sing that he could actually be compared to Hutton? He found out after asking. This Sing's father was no ordinary man. He was one of the 3 leaders of the Dark Blade. He was also one of the leaders that had displayed his powerful abilities, the legendary mage Borg. This name, Borg, could be said to be known far and wide in the breezy plains. 10 years ago, he had barged into Aminya and used the identity of a level 20 legendary mage to challenge Cheyenne, who had just broken through to level 21 at the time. Although he lost to Cheyenne by a thin margin, he still retreated safely. At the end, even Cheyenne had to admit that Borg was just a thin line away from being level 21. Even he himself did not dare to say that he won comfortably. It was also because of this duel that Borg gave up his plans to declare war against the Dark Blade when he had originally wanted to use the chance of breaking through to level 21 to give it a go. Cheyenne also did not take a step away from Aminya, because he knew that once he left, the 3 legendary powerhouses from the Dark Blade would maul the Manhwa family heavily in a short period of time. From this, it was no longer something weird for Sing to be held in the same regard as Hutton. That should be all that the warrior leader knew. After all, he did not have a high position in the Dark Blade. There were way too many leaders with 100 men under them within a gigantic entity, such as the Dark Blade. Although he followed Sing to the Blackstone Mountains this time, he did not partake in any top-secret activities. The command he received was merely to guard the Crimson Python's nest with a group of men. Once they noticed somebody was near, they would immediately attack. Average adventurers were easy to kill, but if they were to meet somebody powerful, they had to notify Sing. 10 level 18 archmages. Lin Li rubbed his nose. He was rather shocked. This was no laughing matter. 10 level 18 archmages. This was almost the same as Alana's Guild of Magic. No wonder Dark Blade was called the strongest band of bandits in the breezy plains. Just this group of men was more than enough to wipe out the Sire bandits. Without summoning the humorous Wyrm and Lord of Nightmares, even Lin Li would have to run 9 out of 10 times. After the warrior confessed what he knew, Lin Li started thinking. What was hiding in the Blackstone Mountains that it could attract both the Manhwa family and Dark Blade at the same time? Unfortunately, this minor enemy commander knew too little. Lin Li could not get any information that explained anything. In the end, he looked at this survivor with annoyance, and then he turned, opening a path. Okay, you can leave now. Ah? The warrior that had already gone mad with fear because of Sendros was stunned when he heard this. What? I can leave now? He thought back for a while, before he understood it. What this young mage meant was, that he wanted to set him free. Why aren't you leaving? Lin Li stared at him in annoyance. You still want me to make you stay for dinner? No, no, no. I didn't mean that. The warrior instantly ran away when he was glared at by Lin Li. Only after the enemy survivor ran out of the forest did Sendros curiously ask, why did you release him? Because I started to get curious, Lin Li smiled, but did not answer Sendros' question directly. Actually, since the matter had already reached this stage, Lin Li's goal in coming to the Blackstone Mountains was almost completed. The battle with the Lich at the Scar of Death not only allowed him to subdue more than 10 Death Knights as well as a humorous Wyrm, he had also obtained Gloomy Dark, which he had always dreamed of getting. The rewards were beyond his imagination. Additionally, he obtained Sendros' assistance. To gather the dragon's tongue would be very simple. He just had to kill and silence a few enemy commanders and call for Sendros. The two of them would stealthily enter the Crimson Python's nest. It would not be an issue if they were to kill the Crimson Python as well after gathering the dragon's tongue. It was just that Lin Li had started becoming curious again all of a sudden. He was curious what sort of secret was hidden in the vicinity of the Crimson Python's nest. Just what was it that it could attract the greedy eyes of gigantic entities such as the Manhwa family and Dark Blade? Of course, other than being curious, Lin Li also thought of proving something else. On the first night he came to the Blackstone Mountains, Lin Li had treated a middle-aged man to barbecue. If Lin Li was not mistaken, the middle-aged man had once said that his house was located at the peak of the Blackstone Mountains. It would be easy to find once they went through the Crimson Python's nest. In fact, Lin Li was close to the mark when guessing this middle-aged man's identity. The only thing left to do was to prove whether this mysterious middle-aged man that knew Amril's history thoroughly by heart was, as Lin Li guessed, that incomparably powerful existence. To prove it was actually simple. A magical brand would more or less achieve that goal. The warrior that had been driven mad with fear by Sendros naturally would not discover that when he escaped, a certain mage had sneakily left a magical brand on him. A magical brand would not cause any injury, and it would not result in adverse statuses. The only effect it had was to leave behind a trace of one's magical aura. Average mages could use this trace of magical aura to determine the location of their target, but an archmage at level 18 and above could use the Warlock's Eyes to stalk the target with the magical brand. Hence, Lin Li immediately cast Warlock's Eyes when the warrior had just stepped out of the forest. Oh, Lin Li did not answer directly, and Sendros did not question any further. He just gave off an "oh" and shut his mouth. It was because to him, the Dark Blade was not something worthy of racking his brains. Although it was rumored that there were 3 legendary powerhouses within the Dark Blade, one could not forget that there were differences between those in the legendary realm. The current Sendros was even stronger than Cheyenne. There were only a few that could threaten him in the whole breezy plains. Not long after the warrior had left the forest, Norfeller and Ujfalusi had already arrived with tens of Death Knights. Lin Li asked a few simple questions about the situation on the road ahead, and called Gavin over. "Gavin, rally the men and follow me." Lin Li constantly had that warrior under surveillance, with the warlock's eyes, while on the move. Lin Li had originally thought that this warrior would bring him to members of the Dark Blade within a short period, but had not thought that the first thing to appear within the warlock's eye's field of vision would actually be a raging battle. It really is the Manhwa family. Using the warlock's eyes' vision, Lin Li could already identify a few familiar faces in the battle without much effort. For example, that level 15 bandit called Reggie, the eldest son from the Black Clouds town's mayor's family, and the two high-level warriors that guarded Adalo. Naturally, it was the members of the Dark Blade that were fighting with the Manhwa family. These two forces had suddenly met each other in the vicinity of the Crimson Python's nest for some unknown reason. The result was naturally an incomparably intense battle. The Manhwa family had at least 400 men on their side. Most of them were adventurers recruited from different places. As for the side of the Dark Blade, it would be much fewer. All in all, there were only 100 or so men. It was just that they were really powerful. Lin Li hastily took a look, and could see that there were at least tens of powerhouses, level 15 and above. Among them, the 10 level 18 archmages that the warrior leader had mentioned were currently using levitation spell to fly in the sky, constantly bombarding the ground with spells. Although the adventurers that the Manhwa family had recruited were many, only 10 or so were truly level 15 and above. Once they met a true powerhouse, their inferior strength was immediately exposed. There were hundreds of adventurers that were pressured by the 10 archmages till they could no longer lift their heads. They were completely suppressed, passively taking a beating. If it were not because they relied on the terrain advantage, they would have been completely overrun by the Dark Blade by this point. Weird. Where is Hutton? The warlock's eyes searched around the battlefield, but could not locate Hutton. Furthermore, it was not just Hutton. That young level 17 archmage from the Dark Blade had apparently never participated in the battle. Lin Li looked on and started to feel curious. Anyone would know that the Manhwa family and Dark Blade were two big forces that could not coexist. Why was it that their subordinates were fighting for their lives, yet these two were hiding somewhere? Unless... Just when Lin Li's mind was full of questions, the warlock's eyes drifted past the Crimson Python's nest. In an instant, a thought flashed past Lin Li's mind. Thank you for watching Mystic Realms Recap. Please like, share and subscribe. Have a great day.